Krystal, what are you taking a look at?
Well, guys, in 2007, activists finally scored a big win, forcing lawmakers to lift the minimum wage to $7.25, where it has remained ever since then. The Democrats were in control of the House and the Senate, and they could have passed a bill that tied the minimum wage to inflation or cost of living increases, setting in motion an automatic provision that would allow the wage to at least keep pace with rising cost of living. But they didn't. Why? Well, because they wanted to preserve the power of the minimum wage as a political cudgel. In effect, they wanted to preserve the ability to have this moment.
One of the fights that I've been waging for a number of years now is to raise that minimum wage to at least $15 an hour. Is that something, Joe, that you are supportive of?
Bernie, I am extremely supportive of that. And I thank you for leading on it. I thank you for your endorsement, your support. But it means that, look,
just stab me in the heart every time. Biden there, of course, promises Bernie, and by extension his voters, that he will lift the minimum wage to $15 an hour, a core goal for Bernie's movement. The fact that the minimum wage had been allowed by design to languish at a pathetic $7.25, it actually served Democrats' interests in regaining power. Now, in the Biden era, Democrats included a revolutionary child tax credit in their initial COVID relief package, a stunningly successful policy. It lifted millions of children out of poverty. It cut childhood hunger dramatically. But they only put the policy in place for 1 year. Why? Well, because they believed that it could be a similarly effective political cudgel that they thought either Republicans would be pushed into actually backing the extension of the child tax credit because of its political popularity, or they could use Republicans' opposition to the CTC as, again, a politically beneficial cudgel in the midterm elections. Now, their calculus turned out to be wrong. The CTC expired with barely a whimper from Democrats or from the national press, even as the families who had briefly benefited from it moved in droves from the Democratic Party to the GOP. And so it is with Democrats and Roe versus Wade. The whole situation, it seems kind of perplexing, right? The Christian right has literally spent decades mobilizing to overturn Roe at the Supreme Court. An entire, well-funded legal architecture has been constructed and justices vetted with precisely this goal in mind. Disciplined one-issue voters backed candidate after candidate, willing to promise them this end result. Ultimately, it was kind of an unlikely figure, Donald Trump, the dude who used to donate to Planned Parenthood and who no one would be shocked to learn if a mistress or two had availed themselves of their services. It was that guy who would deliver this long-awaited victory. He clinched his election by releasing a list of SCOTUS nominees to prove to the evangelical base that he would, in fact, be a reliable partner in their nearly 50-year project. He famously said, Roe would be overturned automatically if he was elected president. The justices he sent up for confirmation to the court were handpicked for exactly this aim. Well, and to make sure that they serve the interests of our nation's oligarchs, as Sagar was discussing. So no one should be surprised that this court did exactly the thing that it had been constructed to do. You could no more be angry at a snake for biting you. This decision was their entire raison d'etre. So with decades of knowledge that this was the ultimate goal of a highly organized, extremely determined movement, why in the world did the Democrats, over many cycles of holding power, refuse to take the extremely obvious and popular step of protecting Roe by enshrining it in federal law? The answer is obvious. Because they cared more about using voters to scare them into line than they did about actually delivering on the issues that they claim to care about. I mean, think about this. As David Sirota points out, Obama promised that the first thing I'll do as president is sign the Freedom of Choice Act. And then the first thing he actually did was bail out his Wall Street donors. I might remind you that Obama had a huge majority in the House and a super majority in the Senate. What excuse could he possibly have for just instantly forgetting one of the things that he promised was a day one action? Even today, as Democrats bemoan the imminent demise of Roe, the entire establishment battalion from Pelosi on down, they've all lined up behind anti-abortion lawmaker Henry Cuellar. This in spite of him, by the way, currently being under FBI investigation. Now, for me personally, I would rather the Democratic litmus test be around committed support for labor unions than for abortion policy as one example. But of course, they don't actually care about any of these issues. They only care about supporting candidates who will uncritically support the current power regime. And they care about whatever cynical manipulations of issues critical to wide swaths of the nation might help them hold or regain power. In fact, the Supreme Court is at the center of these cynical games. How many times have we been told that we must support the current Democratic regime exactly as constituted because if we don't, we'll basically end up in The Handmaid's Tale with the end of Roe? Republicans play the same games, by the way. That's why on the precipice of a victory that their base has worked for and their donors have funded for decades, Republicans are bizarrely despairing. They're bemoaning a leak rather than celebrating what should be unequivocal good news for their ideological project, the culmination of a multi-decade project. In this, the GOP is kind of like the dog that caught the car. They also liked having the status quo, the potential end of Roe as a motivating issue for their base, an organizing principle. Now that they are losing their own little voter cudgel and faced with the prospect of being clearly on the side of a new reality that is not supported by the broader public, they're kind of horrified. For Democrats, on the other hand, who were headed for certain electoral disaster, who are starting to contemplate just reaching once again for the multi-failed messaging of Trump is bad for a midterm in which, of course, Trump is not on the ballot and currently holds no official power, this decision, which is monstrous to their base, is like manna from heaven for Democratic elites. They don't have to do anything to deliver material. They don't have to come up with a messaging strategy. All they have to do is remind everyone how much they hate the Republicans and promise once again that this time will be different. This time, if you elect them, they'll actually do the things that they have been promising for literally decades to do. That's why Biden and co. have been quick to offer a solution to the new Roe predicament. Just elect more Democrats. Sean Patrick Maloney, chair of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Arm, he really took the cake with this blame-shifting assessment. Here's his quote: Democrats, we're angry and hurt, I know, but it's not about filibuster, size of the court, or what the Senate hasn't passed. It's about Republicans, not us. We can save our freedoms, but it's November, stupid. I mean, that is so peak that I almost cannot believe it is not parody. It's possible that this Roe decision upends the midterms, compelling Democrats to vote and even more Democrats in the futile hope that for some reason this time will be different. But I don't actually think it's gonna work too well, because you can only use these cudgels of promises for so long before people ultimately see through your game, before they realize that you don't actually care about these issues you claim are existential in apocalyptic language. And that's not on the voters, by the way, it's on you, the Democratic elites. This time, I suspect their strategy will fail. Because if you look at the way the Democrats have already been wiped out in vast swaths of the country, the truth is this strategy of broken promises and cynical manipulations and constant excuse-making and blaming the voters, that strategy has been failing for a very long time. It really is a kind of an I see. Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.